can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like $100,000.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here. I'm founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders like the founders of P90X, Baby Einstein, Atari, many more, and how they overcome big challenges in life and business. Today, we have a top entrepreneur that I've been waiting to have on for a long, long time. Dan Kuschell. He's a dad, husband, thought leader, humanitarian, angel investor, and business growth specialist. And the bottom line is he helps simplify and grow businesses. One of the reasons I admire Dan so much is because he lists dad first and he lives it. And I have a lot to learn from you, Dan. We'll talk about some of your powerful rituals with your kids. Dan's the founder of GrowthtoFreedom, ProsperityBasedLiving.com, creator of Millionaire's Mindset. One of his many companies had over 175 employees and had $25 million a year in sales. He's also an advisor and CEO with Prana Marketing and Joe Polish's Genius Network. And he's the best-selling author of, here we go, A Champion in the Making, Awakening the Champion Within Your Life, Business, and Relationships. Dan, thank you so much for joining me.
Jeremy, it's an honor. It's a privilege. I'm looking forward to this. Thank you. I talk about it in the book. I talk to, okay, who does Dan have to be? The qualities, confidence, faith, listed all these things. Then it was like, what am I grateful for? What am I happy about? What have I done? And I got obsessed, and I did that twice a day, every day prior to the 2 weeks. And oh, by the way, I had $1,000 to my name at that time. I hauled to Florida. I didn't even have a place to live. I just drove to Florida.
Wow, that's amazing.
Talk about faith, right?
Yeah.
And so I get to Florida, and she goes, hey, it's good to hear from you. But when are you going to be here? I said, I'm here. She goes, you're here. Where you living? I said, well, I'm at this Comfort Inn. Right, that I found on Highway 9, or I forget what it was on. I forget where it was in Tampa, Florida. And she goes, oh, well, are you going to just stay there? I said, I'll stay here as long as I can. And ideally, if there's somebody that I could stay with that you know of, that'd be great. I can rent a room or whatever. And so not too long thereafter, I ended up finding a place. I think it was a month later that I ended up, finding a house that I could rent, and ended up working out. But we did start conquering. We did start, I turned things around in less than 90 days. I think I had earned and generated more business in that 90 days than the previous 9 months combined. Yeah. And within another 6 months or 9 months or so it had been about a year total, I had more than doubled the previous year's company revenue, right? Which also increased my earning potential quite a bit. And so I was really grateful. It was a great opportunity for us to connect and get together. And, I owe a lot to Lori for her belief in me. And it also taught me a lot about being a great coach. It taught me a lot about being a great mentor, and also really paying attention to the little things that matter, like these rituals.
Yeah. So Dan, what was it in those 90 days that it turned everything around?
If I had to pin it to one main thing, I'd say it was attitude.
Really? So just by you going down there on faith, and was there anything being around her? Because obviously, initially, you were inspired by her.
Yes.
From the beginning.
Yeah, so I would say attitude, those practices that I started putting in place that I got obsessed with changed me as a person, right? And then the other thing that I actually did as part of the process of what I was doing is I started teaching these things to other people. And I saw them change. And so when I was changing and I saw people that at the time it was 3 questions. What am I happy about? What have I done well? What am I grateful for right now? I watched as they did this consistently, how their lives changed. It was like flowers blossoming, and we all got to blossom together. And it boosted my confidence. It boosted my esteem. It boosted how I saw myself. So my attitude Jim Rohn, right? The late Jim Rohn, he says, your business and your life will grow to the extent you do. And I became, at that time, I think, I became this, this tree that just started to flourish, that apples you could pick off of it. And I think that would be the biggest thing. And coming back, part of the 5 things that I talk about today, emotional mastery. I think emotional mastery and mindset, I started to really understand that. And in fact, I think back to how I had built my business, because growing up in the inner city, right, I thought baseball would be the way out, and I thought it was going to be a way to take care of my family. I mean, there were times as kids we were on welfare and different things like that.
Right.
And so I always wanted, the best for them and for me and what would be my future kids. And in my businesses, I feel to a degree, for a long time, I was chasing money, right? And as the old adage goes, when you chase money, you'll push it away. Mm. And there was a point in this process, by the way, I actually said to myself when I was going to go work with Lori, look, I'm not going to impress her with the money I make, or in that case, I wasn't making, right? But I can go there and be the best me, right? And I can be a great human being. And
that's a tough thing. It's tough. It's tough to say that. Now you can look back and
yes,
it seems simple, but it's tough to actually come to terms with that, I think.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It wasn't. I mean, I literally remember going through it, Jeremy. I mean, I don't know that I've ever. I think I've talked about this before, but it's been a long, long time. And
no, this is amazing. I appreciate you sharing. This is
as Roy Firestone said to Jerry Maguire, "You're not going to make me cry." I remember just thinking to myself, look, it is what it is, and just go be the best you.
Yeah.
Right? And she was already, at that time, she was a multimillionaire, and I wasn't. And I was like, okay, what can I offer her in value? Right? Yeah. The other part was it really got me to shift perspective. Again, shifting away from chasing the money. I literally remember throwing most of my goals away, right? And I look back at it today, most of my goals were material. I'll earn X dollars, and I'll build this business, and blah, blah, blah. And I'll have this car. And so they were material. And I literally threw them away.
Yeah.
And it became just about being a better human being, a better person. And when I got there, I mean, I think I was doing the same presentations. But I was a different.
There was something different internally that you were thinking.
Yeah, and as the old adages go, in order for things to change, we've got to change. Success starts from the inside out. In order for things to be different, we've got to show up different. Mark Victor Hansen, you've got to be to do to have. So you be the person, do the action to have the result, have the outcome. Yeah. And I think I showed up at that time, and I started to realize what that really was. And then I got so fired up and so lit up by sharing and teaching this to other people that, like I said, it created now these blooming flowers together.
Wow. That is really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Wow.
Yeah, thanks for digging that out of me. Wow.
So Dan, looking back, you've had a lot of milestones, amazing milestones in your career. What are some, when you think back, that are the most memorable to you?
My kids being born.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. I would say that's my proudest moment. My proudest moment is any time I can be with my kids. My proudest moment is when I can be present with my wife, with T. And I do my very best to spend a lot of time with them. Yeah. And I'm not perfect at it by any means, right? If you're going to be successful, I hear people talk about balance quite a bit. Yeah. And I battle it a bit, where I think balance truly is BS. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think you can strive for having a holistic life.
Yeah.
I don't know that balance, because, like I think of sports, right? I think you and I have had this conversation.
I agree with you on this, but I want to hear what you have to say. Yes.
Yeah. Go on. Derek Jeter, to be an insane great baseball player that he was for his 20-year career, he had to be consumed with that sport. Right? I mean, he took holidays off, family time off, and, when you're in season. Yeah. And if you want to be great at anything, most of the people that I know that are truly at that pinnacle level, there's a certain thing that you've got to be willing to say no to in order to say yes to the thing.
Something's got to be sacrificed.
Yeah. Now, with that being said, it comes back to now, how do you treat yourself as a all-pro or all-star person, right? Some of the biggest changes that I made after my hospital experience, Jeremy, when I was on the table, I was in the hospital for 4 days with this heart issue.
So how old are your kids at this time when you have the heart issue?
It's 2 weeks after my son was born.
So it's 2 weeks after. Okay.
Yeah, literally. Proudest moment as a dad. My son is second proudest. Obviously, my daughter 2 years prior.
Right.
My son is born. I've been building these companies, been working so hard to have this culmination. Now I'm going to have my little boy, my little bambino is going to be his, a spit image of his papa, which is me, and he's going to be this, athlete potentially,
Detroit
and
Tiger.
whatever, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to be a guy who sets values. And I wake up one morning, and my throat is closing, my chest has pain, and I felt like I couldn't breathe.
Wow.
And I was in a panic. I remember telling my wife at the time, now ex-wife, and I say, Elisa, I'm not feeling well. And she started to take Kira and Kyler out for a little stroll. Kyler was with the nanny. She was taking Kira out for a stroll. And she goes, are you okay? I said, I think so. But I called my doctor and I said, hey, I'm like having a weird thing. I explaining, my throat, my chest. He's like, how close are you to a hospital? And I said, well, it's like 2 miles.
Not words you want to hear from the doctor.
No.
Yeah.
2 miles. He goes, I don't think it's anything based on the way you're describing it, but why don't you go as a precaution?
Yeah.
And he goes, and I said, well, Lisa just left. I think I'm going to just drive myself. He goes, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, I think I can do that. So I hop in the car, and as I think back on it today, Jeremy, I don't remember driving there.
Wow.
Right? But I did get there, and then I remember going in the hospital, and I say, hey, I'm having pains in my chin. As you know, in a hospital, being a doctor, that kind of sets,
all sorts of red flags.
Off.
Yeah.
And so they sit me in a chair right away. They get the thing on, and they take my pulse and my blood pressure, and they're measuring me, and then all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose. And they're like, they bring a gurney. We need to get you in right away. And so they put me on this gurney, and they stroll me down a hall. And next thing, I've got buttons and lines and wires all over me, like within an hour of being there. It scared the hell out of me. And, so they do all this analysis. Long story short, I think it was the second day, the doctor says, we've seen some arrhythmia going on in your heart, and so we need to do this surgery. Now, all of this, by the way, ended up being false alarms. Everything's been fine. But to do the surgery, which they did do, they run this thing up your body and into the heart. And I had to sign a disclaimer. I have a 1 in X chance of dying with this procedure, right? And it's 1 in a couple hundred. And
it doesn't matter what it is. It's 1 in something. Yeah, you're right.
Chance of dying.
Right.
And I remember being in the hospital, sitting there or laying there, scared to death.
Yeah.
And literally. And I cried like a baby that night, and I wrote my what potentially could have been my last will.
Oh my God.
For hours, like 3, 4 in the morning, I'm writing like pages of these notes for my wife. My son is 2 weeks old, mind you, and my daughter's 2.
Right.
And then there was some point in that night that I had a epiphany, transformation in my mind, and said, when I come out of this, I'm going to make some changes.
Yeah.
And number 1, it's to be a dad. Number 2, it's to focus on my health.
Right.
At that time, I was overweight. I was, almost 65 pounds or 70 pounds heavier than I am today.
It's hard to picture that, yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to look at that picture. Wow. And when I come out of this, I'm going to make some changes. So long in the story, I ended up coming out of it, right? I set myself up. Thank goodness for Joe and Genius Network. I met some people who had sold companies and had an exit strategy. And so I put processes now in place to set the stage to sell my companies. Within 18 months, I had a buyer. Within 2 years, I had, sold the companies. I licensed my name. That was a little bit of a messy scenario, and I learned a ton from that too. But nonetheless, I sold the companies, and I was able to spend time as a full-time dad for a window, and then really get my health in order. I'm so grateful today for my health. I'm so grateful that I was able to have that quality and quantity time with my kids. I think it's made me a better human being, a better dad, a better entrepreneur today. And now there are certain rituals that are just non-negotiable in my life, in what I do.
Like what?
Like, for example, when I wake up in the morning, 6 out of 7 days, I wake up early, 5:30, 6-ish, 6:15. I don't wake up usually to an alarm. And when I get up, I exercise pretty much right away. I jumpstart the day with exercise, and I usually listen to positive audios. Like today, I was listening to your podcast.
Oh, I'm honored,
right, to be able to get ready for today's show, because I wanted to hear and get connected to the spirit of you. And you're fantastic at what you do, by the way.
Thank you.
I love your interviews. I love when you didn't start it with me today. I was kind of surprised by that because I was preparing. What's your low point? You asked.
You went right into it. I didn't even need to ask it. That low point in the hospital. Yeah.
Oh, did I duck into that early?
No, right now.
Oh, okay.
I mean, you're one step ahead of me the whole way. So, yeah.
Yeah, you're a great interview. I can see why having, what is it, over 1,000 interviews that you have?
Over the years, it's approaching that, yeah.
Wow.
Not quite that, but yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
And so I wake up in the morning, I exercise. Usually it's cardio today, 30 to 45 minutes. I have my Fitbit, which tracks my steps. I work for 10,000 steps every day.
Yeah.
30 to 45 minutes of exercise. Usually I follow that with some sort of meditation in the morning.
Yeah.
I eat typically a paleo type diet, right? Then later in the day, like last night, one of my rituals with my wife is meditating together. So we were able to meditate. Also, by the way, back to the front part of the day.
Yeah.
After exercise, usually between the time my breakfast is cooking and that break time, about 20 to 40 minutes, I'm actually writing, journaling.
Yeah.
Like, for example, one of the things that I've done since, the 90s is I keep a journal on all the things going on with interesting questions. Tony Robbins, right?
Yeah. The quality of questions.
The quality of life is determined by the quality of questions.
Yeah.
And so I'm a huge note taker and also someone who loves to write. So I love to get into
So what's lately? What is there anything interesting today that you wrote down? Any good questions?
Let's see what I wrote. Yeah. So today,
if you can't share it, that's cool too. So
No.
Okay.
So the last couple days, over the last 6 months, I've been deep diving into emotional mastery. One of my good friends is Dr. Christy Lopez, who, if you follow our show at GrowthtoFreedom.
GrowthtoFreedom, yes. Everyone should check out GrowthtoFreedom. Some amazing interviews there. And you've interviewed some amazing people as well throughout the years. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So she is someone who's become a good friend. So we're collaborating. We're going to be creating a audio program together on emotional mastery.
Cool.
Right? I'm going to bring the I think I'm the entertainment and she's the science.
I'm sure over the years you've picked up a lot of the science too. So
yeah. So like right now, I'm talking about getting leverage. Right, when we have a lever big enough and strong enough is when we can make change. So this may sound a little bit strange and taken out of context. It might not seem like, wow, this is not the norm. So some of the questions is that I asked myself today.
I love hearing this, Dan. I really appreciate it. I love this. Go on. Yeah.
Okay. So what am I happy and fulfilled about, right, overall? And then what am I unhappy with right now? What am I disturbed by, and what am I disgusted by?
Why do you make that distinction, unhappy and then disturbed?
I like to package it.
Yeah.
Right? The yin and the yang, hot and cold.
Yeah.
Also, here's the other thing. Going into this deep dive on emotional mastery, I think it's so much easier to have mastery of our emotion. I think the quality of our life, if I had to sum up the one thing that could dictate most people's success or failure in life, because isn't it interesting, Jeremy? I mean, you've seen it with all the people you've met. How many people that maybe don't have what most of us would consider success, but they're happy as anything, right? And then there's other people that seem to have it all, but they're unhappy. Right. My greatest regret would be that I didn't enjoy the ride while I was building my companies. I took it a little too seriously, too much of the time. And I had too much stress, and therefore it's why that ritual or those rituals, although I had certain things of success most people would admire. At the end of the day, for me, it wasn't
landed you in the hospital.
Yeah, it landed me there. So staying grounded to that. What am I happy? So another great way to do this that I've discovered is create a list of the positive emotions. Like think of your last 7 days, right? What are the emotions that you've had in the last 7 days the most frequently? And then categorize them as positive emotions and then a separate list of the negative emotions.
Right.
And, Dr. Lopez and I, we've gone through this with different people. And what she recently shared in an interview we did on an episode was that 90% of the time when she asks someone that question, they can't name 10 emotions. And when we can't even name 10 emotions, it's no wonder why we don't have the joy, the passion, the fulfillment, what some people would call happiness that we want. So one way to simply have a better quality of life is simply start naming and coming up with the language around emotion. There's a great book I've got on my bookshelf over here called Feelings that I was introduced to probably 10, 12, 14 years ago.
Who wrote that? Feelings. Okay.
Hold on, let me grab it real quick. So Carol Trauman, Feelings, Buried Alive, Never Die. And I mean, literally there's hundreds of different feelings and emotion. I've got this thing earmarked for the last 10
I can see it. It's like
different things. The reason this is such a great book is just because it gives you a naming convention to list out your feelings.
Yeah.
Right? Tony Robbins, for example, first of all, there's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And then Tony has his 6 human needs. And I like Tony's because they're very simple. Certainty, uncertainty, significance, love, growth, and contribution. I mean, even those 6, if someone got really honed in on naming those and trying to live with those 6, right, versus some of the negative emotions. Like, now, for example, some of the emotions that I'm going to list here that I've dealt with in the last 7 days, frustration, guilt, embarrassment, humiliation.
The past 2 hours I've experienced that. No, I'm just kidding.
Right? Sadness, right? So these are some of the negative. But on the other end, I've got, let me go through them real quick. So I've got joy, I've got passion, I've got purpose, I've got meaning, significance, love, connection, contribution, growth, mastery, confidence, commitment, courage, right? Yeah. And today it's much easier for me to name the but here's the game to this, Jeremy, right? Yeah. Imagine having this list, which I keep this with me all the time. Imagine having access to this list, and that quickly you can shift from, say, frustration to joy,
right?
Just by naming it. And another way to do it, here's powerful. Another game, right? Yeah. And you teach some of this, I know. So I'm preaching to the choir, but I just love the psychology.
You can never hear this too much, yeah.
Yeah, these little things, right? Joe Polish talks about it in terms of little hinges swing big doors, right? And I believe the little things are big things in this case. Because imagine who we all could be if we had emotional mastery, right? What would that look like, right? And by the way, if we were at our best, operating at a peak state, what could we do? What difference could we make? What impact could we make in the world? So a game to play is if you're having a negative emotion, which are normal, right? Which, by the way, Christy Lopez had to teach me that those negative emotions are normal. But they're a great place to visit, not necessarily a great place to stay. Right?
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. So we get to choose that first letter in the champion family values. We get to choose it. Yeah. So in a moment's notice, you, me, we can all choose what emotions that we're living with.
Yeah.
And if we want a high quality of life, just start coming up with more positive emotions that we're living with. Right? So that's something right now. So this was something I was writing today.
Yeah.
I hope that was helpful.
Very helpful. Yeah. What I love about, one of the things I love about your book is, which everyone should pick up, A Champion in the Making. This one is where you map out your ideal day. And it's so powerful to see you do that, the exercise of doing that we don't even consciously map out our day, like our ideal normal day. And so I thought that exercise alone, reading what you wrote, is powerful. And then just knowing everyone should be looking and probably doing that.
Yeah, a vision in your ideal day. I think chapter 23-ish or so in the book. And one of the things that I now have over the last couple years, I like to do that quarterly now.
Oh, really? So you redo it?
And start the year with it.
Wow.
Right? Looking back, Dan Sullivan from Strategic Coach, right, out there in Chicago, he calls a version of this the R factor question, which is a great a simple adaptation, which, let me make sure I've got it correctly. What would have to happen in order, if we look back a year from today, right? So wherever you're at today, look 1 year from now. Look back over the year as though it had happened, and then define what would have to happen in order for you to feel happy and satisfied with your progress of that.
Right.
And so it's just a great
question.
thing to be able to project. So each year now, I like to do this at the beginning of the year, like instead of a New Year's resolution, I like to do a declaration. And I believe in declarations more than I believe in affirmations, right? There's the
You're
declaration.
gonna act on it.
Yeah, Declaration of Independence, right? In our country is one of the most powerful documents ever written. I think you deserve a Declaration of Independence. I deserve a declaration. I think we all deserve a Declaration of Independence, and it starts with making that declaration to ourselves of what, using Dan's R factor, what would have to happen. Or if you go through my book, you can see the idea of the vision in a day in your ideal life. Yeah.
Dan, when you were in that really low point and you were in the hospital and you wrote down those notes, did you save those?
My ex-wife has them somewhere.
That's not a good place to have. That's, I just imagine some of the gems that are in there from that, from those notes. I want to keep you on all night, but Dan, I know you have to be with your wife soon, so I wanted to talk about just for a second about some of your mentors. You talked about Lori. Who are some of your mentors currently, or colleagues, and some of the best advice they've given you?
Oh, that's a great question. There's so many.
Yeah, I know you talked about your dad. You talked about Lori, and who currently do you turn to for advice?
Well, number one, I would say my wife. She's a sounding board. We talked about it earlier, the selection process and the 5 key capabilities to have, hiring/selection of a partner. And my wife is an incredible sounding board and mentor for me. I learn a lot from her. She has a way to communicate with me that just gets me to see a different perspective. Because I'm a visionary. I go and...
What does she do?
She actually works for the government, and she...
what does she do to I guess, when she talks to you in a certain way that actually grounds you, or from your...
Yeah, I would say that our chemistry is very playful.
Okay.
Right, and I think it's also why our marriage works as well as it does, because we're just very playful with each other. We're like 2 kids that are 16, 17, 18 years old, and we laugh about anything and everything. Like one of the sayings we have about our relationship is that we can laugh at nothing, which means everything.
Right.
And it's that makes it work. So if I had to sum it up, it would be that. And so she's one. Joe Polish, right? I work with Joe. I've been a big fan of Joe's for years. I mean, Joe was a client of mine to start with, and he purchased an information product that I had created years ago, which was how to use radio as a platform to generate leads and sales. This is back in 2002 or 3 or something. And then he started his Genius Network 25K group in about 2006 or so. He called me up and said, "Hey, Dan, I'm starting this group. It's going to be $25,000 to be a part of it. You think you'd want to do it?" And I was like, Joe, you call me all the time to come hang out with you, and I've always been to. If I write you a check, I'll probably come and show up more often. So I did, and I was in his group for 5 years, and I kind of went through that. And then after I sold my companies, I took a break, but we stayed friends. And that's one thing about Joe. If I had to pick what I've learned from Joe, is it's about relationship capital and creating transformational value, right? Ahead of ever asking for something. He's one of the best in the world at that. Yeah. And I just respect that. The other thing I respect about Joe, what you see out front, right, is what you see behind the curtain too. Mm-hmm. Good, bad, or indifferent. And I respect that about Joe.
Right.
Also, he's just, years ago, one of the challenges I had in the whole, call it self-development guru industry, there was a point in time, and I think I probably still deal with it today, is how people can be one way front stage and then backstage the incongruency. It can be a little frustrating, but what I appreciate about Joe is that who he is front stage is who he is backstage, and he also talks openly about some of his flaws and vices. So it's relationship, it's about that integrity. He's a marketing savant, Joe.
That comes across pretty, yeah.
Oh my God, he's just incredible that way. So Joe. So then beyond Dan Sullivan. Dan Sullivan, in my view, in my eyes of strategic coach, he is the smartest human being I think I've ever met.
Wow.
Truly. I mean, from business to coaching to people, he is the guide from the side and the sage on the stage at the same time.
Right.
And his wisdom, here he is, here's someone in his 80s planning to be 100 and still making an impact and making a difference worldwide and leaving a legacy. Mm-hmm. He takes over close to 200 free days off per year.
Wow.
And one of the things about Dan, similarly, front stage and backstage are the same
person, yeah.
Right? He isn't out there talking about free days, but then being totally consumed, being a workaholic, right? He literally, when he takes his free days, there's no phone, there's no technology. It's truly a free day, and I respect that about Dan. So many. We have a lot of people in Genius Network. Just about all of them I learned something from.
Dan, go back to Joe for a second. So how did that conversation go for you to come on and be an advisor and CEO of Genius Network?
That's a great question. Let me think back to how that happened. Joe and I he was concerned after my health issue, right? And he was like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm really just being a dad and working on a couple fun independent projects. And he said, hey, well, why don't you check out what we're doing? And so, I advised on a couple things casually. And then we were in a meeting with, as I recall, Richard Rossi, who he ran a company called Envision. I don't know. Do you know Richard?
I know of Richard. I don't know him personally, yes. So he does the company with educating kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's prolific at providing experiential training and events for high-achieving kids.
Right.
And he had a company called Envision years ago. He built it up to about $100 million a year, and then he sold it.
Amazing. Yeah.
Back 4 or 5 years ago, he had a non-compete, and then he started looking at the niche and where he could serve the market. And today, he has Da Vinci is the name of his education company. Mm. And, I actually went to an event a few weeks back. It was me. I ended up in Boston. If you can imagine pulling up into a suburb of Boston, and they have a stadium full of kids.
Wow.
Right? High achieving.
Do you bring your kids with, or you just go?
I didn't. I just went
okay.
Myself. Richard said that I could bring my kids, but it just didn't work out time. I think they were with their mom or something.
Yeah.
But I wanted to go because I'd heard about Richard's events for years. So epic. I go there, and there's, 4,000 kids in this stadium, this hockey stadium in Boston. And the event was life-changing for those kids. Wow. And the way Richard puts it together and so on. So Richard and all of us were having a conversation, and he was asking me, well, what are you doing? And I told him, and he had been talking to Joe, and he goes, you two ought to get together and talk about how you can help each other.
Yeah.
And so one thing led to another, and conversations and back and forth. I think it was over 3 to 6 months, actually, of us communicating and trying to figure out how two entrepreneurs could come together and actually work together. Yeah. And so we call it the entrepreneur-intrapreneurs relationship overall.
Right.
And since that time, which was a little over 3 years ago, it's been a lot of fun. I feel very blessed to be able to, be helping Joe be more of who he is at his best at the front stage. And there's a lot of things I do incredibly well, I think, that helps on the backstage. And, we've grown the company quite a bit and just making a bigger difference today. And I think help both of us be better versions of ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I was watching something and you were breaking down, you're really good at simplifying things, and you're really good at simplifying it and creating a system around it. And I remember you talking about, which is powerful, about like the structure of a company. And most of the time we don't even think about structure. We just are doing our thing. And you're talking about like the visionary, and then you have the executor, and then you have I think the accounting, marketing, and one other thing, and that
sales and operations.
Right. Yeah. And that, I saw that directly from when I'm like, okay, I see the whole, Genius Network, and I see like you as being, I don't know, maybe I'm making this up as like the executor, like Joe's like the visionary person, and then you're like the executor in charge of like a lot of the systems. Would you say that's about accurate, or?
I'd say, that's a pretty close representation.
Yeah. But yeah, it seems like an amazing combination there. So
and what's interesting is, we talk about packaging. I've gotten a chance to know, I got a chance to meet Gino Wickman. I don't know if you know Gino and his partner. They just wrote a book called Rocket Fuel. I'll make sure to introduce you
Rocket
guys.
Fuel.
Yeah, it's awesome. You'll love it. And here's what I did. When I met Gino, I told him this when I met him. I said, I had beat my head against a wall building my 5 companies, and I'd gotten to a place where I guess intuitively, if there is such a thing in business, right? I don't know that that's true, but intuitively figured out some of these components. And then here's Gino and his partner. They had packaged all of this together, all in a simple package that people can go to. Like if you go, what is Gino's site? It's the Entrepreneur's Operating System, or EOS Worldwide, I think. And they have all these incredible tools already pre-packaged. And what's amazing, I told Gino, I said, there's things that I actually do and teach in videos that I didn't even know you before, didn't even know your books, but it would almost be like we're cut out of the same mold, right, for some. But he's got the whole package put together. I mean, and he makes it available open source overall. So there's so much available today with education and simplifying our businesses. Because coming back to what we started the show with, right, which is putting ourselves in a role, Jeremy, where we spend 80% of our time, right, enrolling versus prospecting. Yeah. Well, in Dan Sullivan terms, he talks about unique ability, right? One of the things that all of us can just always be aware of and conscious of, and in my journal, I do this probably once a week or so, is really identifying what are my unique talents and abilities. Right. Where am I at my best? And what are the things I suck at that I shouldn't be doing? And really getting
What do you suck at? What do you think you suck at? Oh, gotcha.
Like doing admin things is just not for me to do. Most HR functions are not really things that I should be doing for anybody, for them or me. Right? And I am best suited to be driving like marketing, sales, culture, communication, and inspiration in the company's growth plans.
So I have one last question for you, Dan, and this has been amazing. So I really appreciate your time with this and making the time, because I know you're super busy. But before I ask it, where can we point people towards? I know you have a couple sites, Growth to Freedom. I don't know if you want to take a minute and tell people about that. You have tons of videos on YouTube, which are really powerful too. Where should people check out?
Yeah, I'd love to do 2 things if you're open to it. I'd love to make a special package available for your listeners, if that would be helpful.
I'd be upset if you didn't do that.
Okay, fair enough. So I would say I'll give my book away to everybody.
Wow.
I've got another book called Walking with the Wise. I was a part of like 15 or 20 other mentors like Dan Kennedy and Tom Hopkins and several others that I'll make available for free. That's no shipping, just free. I've got a special audio program on communication mastery. Mm-hmm. I've got I'll make sure to put the video that we talked about earlier on the hiring model and a couple other special resources. We'll make that available at GrowthtoFreedom.com /inspired. Okay. And if people just leave their name and email address, they'll get access to that unique package. And then, you can check out our show at GrowthtoFreedom.com. Yeah. Where weekly we bring, new interviews, new wisdom. I know we were fortunate and blessed to have you on the show. And I'll make sure that, I would love to make sure everybody hears that interview too.
Yeah. I mean, you've interviewed Brian Tracy, T.R. Vecker, Mark Victor Hansen, just to name a few. Your YouTube videos, there's one where you're talking about the one-page tool, 5 key objective, key projects that support them, who's in charge, and the status. And that's really powerful. I mean, there's just so much on there. So they should check out, Growth to Freedom, but also your YouTube videos as well. I mean, there's so much here. Like, I'm not going to ask it, but your Bootstrap business book, there's an amazing story behind that and how you use that to leverage and have incoming leads, which we did not talk about, which is an amazing story as well. But so last question.
And one last thing that I'd love to throw out there, by the way, because of the work that I do with Joe, and again, he is a mentor and someone that I just feel, I don't think we would have met had Joe and I not had the relationship. So I'd at least like to throw a plug out for Genius Network. For sure. You can learn more about Joe at geniusnetwork.com.
You have an amazing event coming up in October, right?
Yeah, geniusnetworkevents.com. We bring some of the top thought leaders together, Tony Robbins, John Paul DeJoria. There'll be about 250 high achieving entrepreneurs. It's a lot of fun. And, we bring contribution, connection, and collaboration together to provide a place for entrepreneurs to get together to do deal making, strategic partnerships, and a whole lot more.
Yeah. So my last question, thank you, Dan. And the last question is really what it's all about, which is you were going to tell me about your daughter and when you went to see her sing and what happened.
Oh, yeah. That, talk about proud moments. So around Father's Day, I think about a month before Father's Day, my daughter Kira, she's 9. We have her in music classes. And she's been taking piano and she's been taking guitar and so on. And she goes, Daddy, I'm going to be doing something special at the recital, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. Right?
She's a true direct response marketer. She keeps you, yeah.
Yeah, and she says, it's probably going to make you cry. And I'm like, what the heck is she talking to talk to my wife? Like, what is she talking about? And so anyway, there was all this buildup over the course of, like I said, about a month, Jeremy, leading up to it. And then so we have her recital for her school, the spring recital. And we go to the recital, and I didn't know what to expect. And then all of a sudden, here's my daughter, not just with the people up on stage, but she's the lead singer. And she sings one of my favorite songs from John Legend, which is All of Me, Loves All of You. And at the time, there were some instrumentals going on in the background. It was one thing, but when they stopped the instrumentals and it was just her singing solo, she was hitting notes as a 9-year-old that I was just, take my daughter out of the picture, that she hit that just, it took my breath away. But then compound that when it is your daughter, right, and then take your breath away when it is your favorite song, right? Yeah. That my wife and I have. It was like the perfect moment, right? Yeah. And as I think about that, a few things pop up. Number one, how grateful that I am that we live in a time and a place in a great country like we do, that we have the opportunity to provide things like this for our kids, right? And we get the ability to go take advantage of, all these incredible blessings and capitalism and build businesses and help people and make an impact. And number two is what life is really about for me. Like, one of the biggest regrets that I shared earlier, which is not enjoying the moments. And today, what I really strive to do is not just enjoy moments, but is to create memorable moments all the time. Yeah. And like even my wife talks about, wow, you just live life at a place that it's, it's adventurous. It's fun. There is definitely something to enjoy, and that, it's not running. Whereas before, I think, I achieved certain, like I remember going to Necker Island and it being something where, okay, what's next? Right? I got that adrenaline fix. What's next? Today, I've come to a place in my life, and I think it was through my experience and my health challenge. Right. And then kids will do this, as you know, right? Kids will do this with you. And I'm grateful that I get to truly do it with them and enjoy it with them and build memorable moments as often as possible. You know, the old saying, it's if infant butts were candy and nuts, it'd be Christmas all year round. Well, why not live every day like a holiday?
Right.
It doesn't take much. It doesn't take money either. Like for me, a holiday today is getting up. I choose to get up and exercise and build into my vitality and health. I choose to meditate and I'm in a more peaceful place. Right? I choose that I can eat healthy. I choose that, you know, I get to write and be creative, right? And then I choose how I live my day is with confidence and faith and focus and the ability to contribute, to make a difference with purpose, with meaning. We get to choose that. And then I get to cap my day off. You know, I work hard like you do, like chances are most of the listeners and viewers do here. And I get to cap my day. I'm a proud moment of, you know, couple of my pet projects down the road are going to be a program called leadandgrowrich.com. Another one called Walks with My Wife. Right? Walks with my wife. It's so simple, but not only do I get to exercise by taking a walk with but we have incredible conversations. And I want to create a movement because I think there are a lot of alpha male entrepreneurs who get caught up in being entrepreneurs and building and growing. Yeah. And there's that bonding with our spouse and our wife that can have such a tremendous positive impact, almost like meditation times 10. At least that's been my experience. And I don't know where this will go, and I don't know if it'll catch fire or anything, but it's just a pet project.
For you.
Even for my kids, the idea of taking walks with your wife, to me, is just a healthy life experience that, you know, as I think about it, if I can duplicate that to my son Kyler, so he watches me and he takes these walks with me and my wife too, and he sees that and he teaches that to his kids, and maybe there are others that get inspired with this simple idea that they just take simple walks with their wife and share stories, and maybe they're discussing things like these types of questions and building memories and how they're going to do that. Right. Wow, what a great gift. Yeah. And anyway, so yeah.
Well, Dan, thank you so much. This has been truly amazing. I really appreciate it.
Awesome, Jeremy. Yeah. It's a pleasure, an honor. I hope we can do it again sometime.
Yes. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other